Tete Rouge, but his wrongs rankled in his breast. Tete Rouge had taken his place at dinner. It was his happiest moment. He sat enveloped in the old buffalo coat, sleeves turned up in preparation for the work, and his short legs crossed on the grass before him. He had a cup of coffee by his side and his knife ready in his hand, and while he looked upon the fat hump ribs, his eyes dilated with anticipation. Delorier sat just opposite to him, and the rest of us by this time had taken our seats. "How is this, Delorier? You haven't given us bread enough." At this Delorier's placid face flew instantly into a paroxysm of contortions. He grinned with wrath, chattered, gesticulated, and hurled forth a volley of incoherent words in broken English at the astonished Tete Rouge. It was just possible to make out that he was accusing him of having stolen and eaten 4 large cakes which had been laid by for dinner. Tete Rouge, utterly confounded at this sudden attack, stared at Delorier for a moment in dumb amazement, with mouth and eyes wide open. At last he found speech, and protested that the accusation was false, and that he could not conceive how he had offended Mr. Delorier, or provoked him to use such ungentlemanly expressions. The tempest of words raged with such fury that nothing else could be heard. But Tete Rouge, from his greater command of English, had a manifest advantage over Delorier, who, after sputtering and grimacing for a while, found his words quite inadequate to the expression of his wrath. He jumped up and vanished, jerking out between his teeth one furious "Sacre enfant de grace," a Canadian title of honor, made doubly emphatic by being usually applied together with a cut of the whip to refractory mules and horses. The next morning we saw an old buffalo escorting his cow with 2 small calves over the prairie. Close behind came 4 or 5 large white wolves, sneaking stealthily through the long meadow grass, and watching for the moment when one of the children should chance to lag behind his parents. The old bull kept well on his guard, and faced about now and then to keep the prowling ruffians at a distance. As we approached our nooning place, we saw 5 or 6 buffalo standing at the very summit of a tall bluff. Trotting forward to the spot where we meant to stop, I flung off my saddle and turned my horse loose. By making a circuit under cover of some rising ground, I reached the foot of the bluff unnoticed, and climbed up its steep side. Lying under the brow of the declivity, I prepared to fire at the buffalo, who stood on the flat surface not 5 yards distant. Perhaps I was too hasty, for the gleaming rifle barrel leveled over the edge caught their notice. They turned and ran. Close as they were, it was impossible to kill them when in that position, and stepping upon the summit, I pursued them over the high arid tableland. It was extremely rugged and broken. A great sandy ravine was channeled through it, with smaller ravines entering on each side like tributary streams. The buffalo scattered, and I soon lost sight of most of them as they scuttled away through the sandy chasms. A bull and a cow alone kept in view. For a while they ran along the edge of the great ravine, appearing and disappearing as they dived into some chasm and again emerged from it. At last they stretched out upon the broad prairie, a plain nearly flat and almost devoid of verdure, for every short grass blade was dried and shriveled by the glaring sun. Now and then the old bull would face toward me. Whenever he did so, I fell to the ground and lay motionless. In this manner I chased them for about 2 miles, until at length I heard in front a deep, hoarse bellowing. A moment after, a band of about 100 bulls, before hidden by a slight swell of the plain, came at once into view. The fugitives ran toward them. Instead of mingling with the band as I expected, they passed directly through and continued their flight. At this I gave up the chase, and kneeling down, crawled to within gunshot of the bulls, and with panting breath and trickling brow, sat down on the ground to watch them. My presence did not disturb them in the least. They were not feeding, for indeed there was nothing to eat, but they seemed to have chosen the parched and scorching desert as the scene of their amusements. Some were rolling on the ground amid a cloud of dust. Others, with a hoarse rumbling bellow, were butting their large heads together, while many stood motionless as if quite inanimate. Except their monstrous growth of tangled grizzly mane, they had no hair, for their old coat had fallen off in the spring, and their new one had not as yet appeared. Sometimes an old bull would step forward and gaze at me with a grim and stupid countenance. Then he would turn and butt his next neighbor, then he would lie down and roll over in the dirt, kicking his hoofs in the air. When satisfied with this amusement, he would jerk his head and shoulders upward, and, resting on his forelegs to stare at me in this position, half blinded by his mane, and his face covered with dirt, then up he would spring upon all fours and shake his dusty sides. Turning half round, he would stand with his beard touching the ground, in an attitude of profound abstraction, as if reflecting on his puerile conduct. "You are too ugly to live," thought I, and aiming at the ugliest, I shot 3 of them in succession. The rest were not at all discomposed at this. They kept on bellowing and butting and rolling on the ground as before. Henry Chatillon always cautioned us to keep perfectly quiet in the presence of a wounded buffalo, for any movement is apt to excite him to make an attack. So I sat still upon the ground, loading and firing with as little motion as possible. While I was thus employed, a spectator made his appearance. A little antelope came running up, with remarkable gentleness, to within 50 yards, and there it stood, its slender neck arched, its small horns thrown back, and its large dark eyes gazing on me with a look of eager curiosity. By the side of the shaggy and brutish monsters before me, it seemed like some lovely young girl wandering near a den of robbers, or a nest of bearded pirates. The buffalo looked uglier than ever. "Here goes for another of you," thought I, feeling in my pouch for a percussion cap. Not a percussion cap was there. My good rifle was useless as an old iron bar. One of the wounded bulls had not yet fallen, and I waited for some time, hoping every moment that his strength would fail him. He still stood firm, looking grimly at me, and disregarding Henry's advice, I rose and walked away. Many of the bulls turned and looked at me, but the wounded brute made no attack. I soon came upon a deep ravine which would give me shelter in case of emergency, so I turned round and threw a stone at the bulls. They received it with the utmost indifference. Feeling myself insulted at their refusal to be frightened, I swung my hat, shouted, and made a show of running toward them. At this they crowded together and galloped off, leaving their dead and wounded upon the field. As I moved toward the camp, I saw the last survivor totter and fall dead. My speed in returning was wonderfully quickened by the reflection that the Pawnees were abroad, and that I was defenseless in case of meeting with an enemy. I saw no living thing, however, except 2 or 3 squalid old bulls scrambling among the sand hills that flanked the great ravine. When I reached camp, the party was nearly ready for the afternoon move. We encamped that evening at a short distance from the river bank. About midnight, as we all lay asleep on the ground, the man nearest to me, gently reaching out his hand, touched my shoulder, and cautioned me at the same time not to move. It was bright starlight. Opening my eyes and slightly turning, I saw a large white wolf moving stealthily around the embers of our fire, with his nose close to the ground. Disengaging my hand from the blanket, I drew the cover from my rifle, which lay close at my side. The motion alarmed the wolf, and with long leaps he bounded out of the camp. Jumping up, I fired after him when he was about 30 yards distant. The melancholy hum of the bullet sounded far away through the night. At the sharp report, so suddenly breaking upon the stillness, all the men sprang up. "You've killed him," said one of them. "No, I haven't," said I. "There he goes, running along the river." "Then there's 2 of them. Don't you see that one lying out yonder?" We went to it, and instead of a dead white wolf, found the bleached skull of a buffalo. I had missed my mark, and what was worse, had grossly violated a standing law of the prairie. When in a dangerous part of the country, it is considered highly imprudent to fire a gun after encamping, lest the report should reach the ears of the Indians. The horses were saddled in the morning, and the last man had lighted his pipe at the dying ashes of the fire. The beauty of the day enlivened us all. Even Ellis felt its influence, and occasionally made a remark